I never expected my routine gym sessions to lead to something this intense. When Ella first approached me between sets, her confidence caught me off guard. Most people at the gym stayed in their bubble, focused on their workouts, but she walked right up with a water bottle in hand and a smile that lit up her entire face. "Your form is perfect," she said, gesturing to the bench press. "Want to show me how you do it?" What started as training tips evolved into coffee after workouts, then dinner dates filled with stories of her wild college days and previous relationships. She spoke about them with such casualness, detailing encounters that made me shift uncomfortably in my seat. But there was something magnetic about her openness, the way she owned every aspect of her life without apology. Within days, our texts became constant. She'd send morning messages about her marketing campaigns, random thoughts during lunch breaks, and late-night musings about life. Her energy was infectious, and I found myself checking my phone more often than I'd like to admit. Then came the invitation to her apartment. The message pinged while I was reviewing financial reports at work. "Come over tonight, I'll cook dinner." Simple, direct, leaving no room for misinterpretation. My finger hovered over the keyboard as I considered my response. Something about the speed of it all made me pause. I'd always been the type to take things slow, analyze every angle before making a move. But Ella didn't operate on cautious timelines. When I suggested maybe we should wait, she called immediately. "Life's too short for maybes," she said, her voice carrying that playful edge that made it hard to say no. "Besides, I make amazing pasta." I found myself agreeing, pushing aside the voice in my head that questioned why everything felt so rushed. After all, isn't this what people want? Someone who knows what they want and goes for it. The drive to her apartment that evening was filled with mixed emotions. Excitement mingled with apprehension as I remembered how she'd casually mentioned her collection of past lovers during our last coffee date. She'd laughed it off, calling herself a free spirit, but something about her tone suggested these connections had been more about quantity than quality. We'd been seeing each other for a few weeks when Ella cornered me after dinner at my favorite Italian place. Her blue eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my chest tighten. "I need to know where this is going, Ivor. I don't do casual anymore." The wine glass in my hand suddenly felt heavy. Her directness caught me off guard, but there was something magnetic about her conviction. After a moment's hesitation, I agreed to make things official. That decision opened the floodgates. Within days, her presence in my life multiplied tenfold. My apartment became her second home. Her toothbrush appeared in my bathroom. Her clothes filled an empty drawer I hadn't offered. Every evening after work, she'd be there, waiting on my couch with takeout or wearing one of my shirts. At first, the constant attention felt intoxicating. She'd surprise me with lunch at work, sending my coworkers into whispers about my gorgeous girlfriend. Her passionate nature turned every moment into an adventure. Spontaneous midnight drives, impromptu dance sessions in my living room, intense conversations that lasted until dawn. But the excitement gradually gave way to exhaustion. My gym routine fell apart because she'd guilt me about spending time away from her. My weekly calls with my parents shortened because she'd hover nearby, asking when I'd be done. Even my morning shower became a shared activity. She'd slip in uninvited, claiming she missed me too much to wait. My apartment, once my sanctuary, transformed into a space I no longer recognized. Her scented candles replaced my plain ones. Her artwork appeared on my walls. Her playlist constantly filled the silence. The few times I tried to spend an evening alone, she'd show up anyway, armed with reasons why she needed to see me. The suffocation crept in, slowly, like a vine wrapping around my chest. I found myself missing the simple pleasure of sprawling on my couch alone, or the quiet mornings with just my thoughts and coffee for company. But every time I hinted at needing space, her eyes would well up with tears. and I'd backtrack, telling myself I was lucky to have someone who loved me so intensely. I knew something was off when Ella started showing up unannounced at my apartment. The first time, she brought takeout from my favorite Thai place, acting like it was a thoughtful surprise. But I'd specifically asked for space to focus on my work projects. "Just wanted to make sure you're eating properly," she'd say, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. The interruptions became more frequent. Text messages turned from supportive to snippy. "Must be nice to have so much free time to hit the gym," she'd write when I posted my usual workout updates. "Or guess work is more important than responding to your girlfriend." During our scheduled dates, her comments carried a sharper edge. Over dinner at our regular spot, I mentioned my upcoming presentation at work. She rolled her eyes, picking at her salad. "Another late night at the office? How convenient." The gym used to be my sanctuary, but even that changed. She'd call right in the middle of my workouts, and if I didn't pick up, I'd find a string of messages questioning who I might be with. One evening, while reviewing financial reports in my home office, my phone buzzed for the 5th time in an hour. Ella's messages escalated from, "Hey, thinking about you," to, "Why are you ignoring me?" to, "I can't believe you're doing this to me." I tried explaining again during our next meetup at her place. "This is temporary. I just need to focus right now." "Focus on what exactly? Because it seems like you're focusing on everything except us." She paced her living room, arms crossed. "You know what? Go ahead. Focus on your precious career. But don't expect me to just sit around waiting for you to pencil me into your schedule." The rational part of me understood her frustration, but every time I tried to set boundaries, she'd find ways to push against them. A quick coffee date turned into hours of her venting about feeling neglected. My attempts to stick to my study schedule were met with guilt-tripping texts about how other couples made time for each other. The breaking point came during a crucial week of deadline preparations. Ella showed up at my office lobby, claiming she just happened to be in the area. My coworkers' curious glances made me uncomfortable, as she loudly proclaimed how she had to resort to such measures since I was too busy to answer her calls. I'd missed 2 calls during a meeting that morning. Just 2. The energy I needed for my work and studies increasingly went toward managing Ella's emotions. Each day brought a new drama, a new accusation, a new demand for attention. The space I'd asked for didn't exist anymore. Instead, it had filled up with her presence, her needs, her constant push for more than I could give right now. I'd always thought of myself as level-headed, someone who didn't leap to conclusions without solid evidence. But walking into Ella's apartment that night, it crumbled whatever illusions I had about being calm under pressure. I had flowers in one hand, a pizza box balanced in the other, and this flicker of excitement in my chest, sure that whatever mess we'd argued about earlier that week could be smoothed over. I'd even rehearsed a little opening line while climbing the stairs. The door wasn't even locked, which struck me as odd, but not enough to second-guess knocking lightly before stepping inside. Then I saw him. Jake. Slouched back on her sleek grey couch, like it had been molded for him, legs crossed casually at the ankle, holding one of those embarrassingly kitschy mugs Ella kept around for visitors. He glanced up as I froze mid-step, and there wasn't a single ounce of discomfort in his expression. If anything, it was like he expected me to walk in, and thought nothing of it. Ella, on the other hand, shot up from where she was perched on the armrest, her usual poise dropping for a flicker of a second, just long enough for my pulse to spike. "You didn't text," she started, her voice sharper than the situation seemed to warrant, like I had done something wrong. Her hand glossed over her hair, smoothing it down, as if trying to look collected when the whole scene was anything but. Jake didn't say much, didn't have to, really. The guy had this maddening, infuriating ease about him, like a cat that knew it owned the room. "Nice flowers," he offered, his lip tugging into a smirk that I couldn't read without seeing red. Pizza guy and florist, multi-talented. Ella cut him off, turning to me before I could find words to untangle the knot in my throat. Jake's a colleague. We're going over some metrics before tomorrow's pitch. It's nothing. She tilted her head, the edge in her tone softening to that coaxing rhythm I'd heard her use on people she was trying to charm. Her everything is under control voice, which only made the whole thing feel less under control. You're overthinking this. Was I? The rational part of me screamed at how on the nose it felt having Jake, of all people, in her apartment past 10 on a Friday night. But her confidence threw me. She wore certainty like armor. If it rattled her to have him here when I showed up, she was doing a damn good job hiding it. The first time Ella stayed over without asking, I let it slide. She had crashed on my couch after a late dinner, half drunk and draped in her usual bravado. She joked about how my futon was a step up from her ex's lumpy mattress. I laughed, even though it wasn't really funny. The next morning, she used my shower, borrowed one of my shirts, and left a ring of eyeliner around the sink. I convinced myself it wasn't a big deal. People forget stuff when they're comfortable, right? Except she didn't just leave that day. Not really. By the third night that week, it was like she'd set up camp. Her clothes started blending into my laundry basket. Her perfume clung to my couch cushions. And somehow, my pillows, even though she wasn't supposed to be in my bed. She rearranged my coffee mugs in a way that made no sense. At work, I found her text messages stacked like bricks in my notifications. What are you up to? Followed by miss you, and then you always take forever to reply. It wasn't sweet, it was relentless. When I'd tried to carve out some space for myself, that's when her tone flipped. She would flash her magnetic smile, curl up next to me on the couch like a content cat, and trace invisible patterns on my arm. It was calculated, I think. The precise moment I started to relax, she'd ramp it up, telling me about the connection she felt, the way she liked how I grounded her chaotic energy. I'd barely got a word in before she'd kiss me. And yeah, there were times it was hard to push her away. Those sparks were still there, but her intensity singed every interaction. The whiplash came when I didn't respond in kind. Once I tried to meet a deadline on my laptop, while she curled against me. She tilted her head, watching me, and said, "You don't find me attractive anymore, do you?" The accusation came out mellow, almost like a joke, but her jaw tightened like she was holding back something meaner. When I said that wasn't it, she rolled her eyes, tossed off a flippant whatever, and went to the kitchen, slamming the cupboard doors in passive-aggressive punctuation. The more I stayed quiet, the louder her presence became. My apartment started feeling smaller, suffocating even, but I couldn't find the words to tell her. Maybe it was guilt. It always came back to guilt. I was going through my usual morning routine when Ella called, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. She announced her upcoming business trip, some marketing conference in Chicago that would keep her away for a week. The news caught me off guard, especially since she hadn't mentioned any work travel plans before. This is huge for my career, the networking opportunities alone. Her words tumbled out in rapid succession as she described the potential connections she could make. Later that evening at her apartment, I watched her pack. Her suitcase lay open on the bed, filled with an assortment of cocktail dresses and business attire. The contents seemed excessive for a marketing conference, but I pushed the thought aside. "Let me drive you to the airport tomorrow," I offered, folding one of her blouses. "Traffic can be brutal early morning." Ella's movement stiffened. She turned away, busying herself with organizing her makeup bag. "That's sweet, but I've already arranged everything. Besides," she hesitated, "I haven't exactly told anyone at work about us yet." My hand froze mid-fold. We'd been dating for months. Not even your team? You know how office gossip can be. She waved dismissively. I prefer keeping my personal life separate from work. Something felt off about the whole situation. The sudden trip announcement, her reluctance to share details, the way she dodged my questions about which hotel she'd be staying at. When I pressed for more information about the conference, she changed the subject, showing me the new shoes she'd bought for the trip. Classic Ella, deflecting with charm and enthusiasm. I remembered how she'd done the same thing last month when I suggested meeting her colleagues at a company event, and the time before that when I'd bumped into her downtown during lunch hour and she'd quickly steered me away from her office building. Red flags waved in my mind, but I pushed them down. Ella was independent, always had been. It was one of the things that drew me to her in the first place. Maybe I was being paranoid, letting my insecurities cloud my judgment. After all, some people really did prefer keeping their work and personal lives separate. The next morning, she texted that her ride to the airport had arrived. No goodbye kiss, no see you later coffee, just a message and a week of distance ahead. I stared at my phone, fighting the urge to drive by her place anyway. Instead, I headed to the gym, hoping to sweat out these nagging doubts. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, lifting weights that felt heavier than usual, I kept telling myself that this was just Ella being Ella. She valued her privacy. That's all it was, nothing more. The unease had been gnawing at me for days. Ella's texts grew sparse, her excuses about poor reception and busy schedules wearing thin. Each notification on my phone made my stomach drop, hoping it was her, only to face disappointment. Then came the message that shattered everything. Hi, Ivor. You don't know me, but we need to talk. I'm Nicola. The text appeared during my lunch break at work. It's about Ella and Jake. My hands trembled as I read through Nicola's introduction. She explained she was Jake's fiancée, a detail Ella had conveniently never mentioned. My chest tightened as I scrolled through the message thread. I'm sorry to do this, but you deserve to know. Another message popped up. Images followed, Ella and Jake at a beachside restaurant, their body language intimate. Then more photos, them kissing by a pool, entering a hotel room. The timestamps matched Ella's business trip dates perfectly. I stared at my screen, bile rising in my throat. The final photo showed them wrapped around each other in swimwear, Jake's hands possessively on Ella's waist. Their faces radiated a familiarity that spoke of more than just a recent fling. The memory hit me like a punch to the gut. Jake in Ella's apartment that morning? His casual demeanor? Her flimsy explanation? The coffee cups on the counter? His lingering look as he left? Every detail I'd dismissed came rushing back with crystal clarity. Nicola's next message cut through my spiral. They've been sleeping together for months, I found out through Jake's work emails. He's been arranging these business trips, specifically to meet her. My office walls seemed to close in. The sandwich on my desk turned to cardboard in my mouth. All those late-night calls Ella claimed were work, her sudden business trips, the weekends she was too busy to meet. Each excuse now revealed itself as another calculated lie. I scrolled back through my own photos with Ella, seeing them through new eyes. While I'd been planning our future, she'd been orchestrating an elaborate deception. The woman who'd made me feel special had been playing me for a fool. Another buzz from Nicola. I thought you should hear it from someone directly involved. She extended the trip yesterday. They're staying at the Meridian Hotel until next week. The revelation about the extended trip was the final twist of the knife. Ella had fed me some story about client meetings running long, how this extra week could mean a promotion. I'd even congratulated her, proud of her apparent professional success. I sat there, surrounded by spreadsheets and financial reports, while my personal life crumbled into dust. The rational part of my brain tried to make sense of it all, to find some logical explanation that could dull the pain. But the evidence was irrefutable, laid bare in pixels and timestamps on my phone screen. The past months replayed in my head like a movie, each scene now tainted with doubt. Every time she checked her phone during our dates, every cancelled plan, every work emergency. The pieces fit together in a perfect pattern of betrayal. I saw her before she saw me. The jet bridge still hung open behind her as she sauntered out, head tilted back, in a laugh that carried over the din of the baggage claim. The guy next to her, tall, clean-cut, shouldering one of those expensive leather duffels, was leaning in closer than felt appropriate. His hand brushed her arm as they walked, and she didn't move away. For a second, I just stood there, jaw tightening. My hands dug into my jacket pockets as I tried to process what the hell I was seeing. She had texted me just this morning, insisting I skip the trip and saying she'd Uber home, that she didn't want to be a bother. I ignored her and left work early because for some stupid reason, I thought maybe showing up unannounced would feel romantic. Instead, I was watching her giggle like a teenager with some guy who wasn't me. I closed the gap fast, steps clicking sharp on the polished airport tiles. My pulse thudded in my ears. Ella. Her head snapped up, and for just a second I saw something flicker on her face. Surprise, discomfort, maybe, before that brilliant practice smile of hers slid back into place. Ivor! She said it like she was delighted to see me, like we hadn't just gone days without a real conversation while she was away for work. The guy beside her paused, scanning me with curious, disinterested eyes. Ella didn't flinch when she looped her arm through his, closing that too small space between them. "This is Marcus," she said before I could ask, her tone breezy and unaffected. "My colleague. He's gay, so don't get weird about it." Marcus blinked, then gave an uncomfortable smile, nodding briefly as if that sealed the deal. "Gay?" I spat back before I could stop myself. My voice was louder than I'd meant it to be, drawing glances from a couple of travelers hauling oversized luggage past us. Her casual dismissal only made the fire burning in my chest rise higher. "You're kidding me, right?" She tilted her head, bored amusement dusting her expression. "What's your problem, Ivor? You're acting paranoid." Her words laced with that edge she always got when she wanted to paint me as irrational, overreacting. But I wasn't buying it. Not this time. Maybe everyone else fell under that spell of hers, that calm, collected charm she wore like armor, but I wasn't about to let this slide. Still, I needed clarity. Something solid. I couldn't just carry on instinct alone. I sat at Ella's desk, my hands trembling as I navigated through her laptop. She'd left it open, logged into her email while rushing out for a work emergency at 9 p.m. The screen's glow cast harsh shadows across her home office, illuminating the framed photos of us on the wall, moments that now felt like elaborate lies. A notification popped up, a hotel confirmation for tomorrow night at the Riverside Inn. My stomach churned as I clicked through her email folder labeled Work Events. There were dozens of similar reservations, spanning months, always under her personal email, never her work account. The text messages were worse. Jake's name appeared frequently, their exchanges growing increasingly explicit over time. Photos exchanged at midnight, arrangements for quick meetings in empty conference rooms, detailed accounts of their encounters. But Jake wasn't alone. Other names appeared. Colleagues I'd met at company parties, men who'd shaken my hand with friendly smiles while harboring their secrets. My finger scrawled through an endless stream of nude photos she'd sent, each one time-stamped during moments I thought we were building something real. Some were taken in her office bathroom, others in hotel rooms I'd never seen. The same provocative poses she'd once sent to me, now mass-distributed like promotional material. A spreadsheet caught my eye, meticulously organized, with dates, names, and locations. She'd treated her affairs like a project management task, complete with color coding and status updates. The clinical nature of it made my skin crawl. There were overlapping dates, multiple men in the same week, sometimes the same day. Jake's name appeared most frequently, their meetups coinciding with those late-night strategy sessions she'd mentioned. His engagement to Nicola hadn't deterred either of them. The messages between them read like a twisted inside joke, planning their encounters around company events and client meetings. I discovered a folder of videos, each one a visual confirmation of what the messages had already revealed. My throat tightened as I clicked through them, unable to look away from the evidence of her betrayal. The timestamps matched nights when she'd claimed to be working late or attending networking events. The sheer volume of evidence overwhelmed me. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a single indiscretion. It was a calculated pattern of behavior. She'd orchestrated this double life with precision, maintaining spreadsheets and folders as if managing another marketing campaign. Buried in her cloud storage, I found more photos, more reservations, more lies. Each click revealed another layer of deception, another man, another betrayal. The careful organization of it all spoke to a level of premeditation that made me physically ill. The confrontation happened at her apartment. I'd gathered screenshots, messages from mutual friends, and even a detailed timeline of her infidelity. My hands shook as I showed her the evidence on my phone, watching her face for any sign of remorse. But Ella just sat there on her designer couch, scrolling through the proof with an almost bored expression. She tossed my phone back at me with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "You're making such a big deal out of nothing. Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with your career and the gym, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere." The casual way she said it, like cheating was somehow justified, made my blood boil. Years of suppressed anger erupted. "Nothing? You fucked half of downtown while I was working my ass off to build a future for us." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, don't act all high and mighty. You were never there when I needed you. Always studying, always at the gym. What'd you expect?" "I expect basic fucking decency, the bare minimum of respect." Tears started forming in her eyes, the same manipulative tactic she'd used countless times before. "You're being cruel. I have needs, Ivor. Emotional needs you never met." "Save the crocodile tears, we're done. Completely done." I stormed out, slamming the door so hard her pretentious art prints rattled on the walls. The next day, I went to the clinic. The doctor's words hit like a punch to the gut. Gonorrhea. Another parting gift from Ella's escapades. I blocked her number, social media, email, everything. But the anger festered, growing darker with each passing day. The antibiotics were a constant reminder of how thoroughly she'd betrayed my trust. She'd not only cheated but put my health at risk without a second thought. The rage consumed my thoughts. She needed to face consequences for once in her privileged life. No more skating by on charm and fake tears. Exposing Ella wasn't some spur-of-the-moment decision. It was like piecing together a damn puzzle, one I didn't even know existed until I saw the edges start to form. The lies, the sly glances at her phone, the hushed conversations that stopped mid-sentence when I walked into the room. I wasn't stupid. But I'll admit, I wanted to be. It was easier to believe the excuses than to dig into what I already knew was rotten. When it all clicked, though, When I finally saw the full picture, something inside me hardened. This wasn't just about her screwing around. It was the web she wove, the carelessness with people's lives, the way she fed off chaos and thrived in deception. It wasn't just me who'd been burned, it was everyone in her orbit. And the worst part? She didn't even seem to care. I started with her emails. She wasn't exactly careful, which honestly made everything easier for me. A few nights of skimming through her laptop when she left it open, and there it was. Flirty exchanges with colleagues, mentions of nights out that never seemed to make it into her version of events, even a few explicit messages that left no questions. It was nauseating, and weirdly enlightening at the same time. If she thought she was untouchable, she was about to find out how wrong she was. By the time I moved to her work Discord, it honestly felt like overkill. I wasn't out to ruin her, okay, maybe I was, but most of all, I just wanted some proof for myself. Closure, if that's what you'd call it. Instead, I found worse. Sarcastic jabs at coworkers, vindictive gossiping, and casual cruelty that made me wonder how I'd ever been roped in by her charm. Looks can mask a lot, but words, they cut through the mask real fast. Once I had it all, I couldn't just sit on it. There was no justification in my head for letting her get away with everything. I compiled every email, screenshot, and message into a neat little folder. I obsessively organized it, cross-referenced timelines, even labeled things with color codes to highlight just how deep she'd buried herself. On some level, I knew it had gone beyond seeking justice. It became a project, distracting me from the mess she'd made of my life. But even as it consumed me, I didn't regret doing it, not for a second. Her boss was my first target. Not some anonymous whistleblower tip, no. I wanted her to know exactly where this came from. I attached the folder to an email, subject line sharp and succinct. Toxic environment proof. Just imagining her reaction kept me awake that night, adrenaline buzzing in my veins. And when I didn't get a reply the next morning, I didn't panic. I knew it was only a matter of time. The social media account came next, just another layer of accountability, I told myself. A way to make sure this didn't get swept under the rug. I created it from scratch. Fresh username, locked-down privacy, the works. I uploaded screenshots, tagged the people who needed to see them, and let the internet do its thing. The likes and reposts racked up faster than I expected. Even people I didn't tag started piling on. Ella's carefully curated image of herself was shredded in real time. She called me that night, of course she did. Her voice dripped with venom, her words sharp enough to cut glass. She accused me of everything she could think of, slander, petty jealousy, even sabotage, as if I was the one who set fire to her life. But I wasn't biting. I listened, silent, until her fury began to feel hollow, like a storm running out of fuel. When she switched to threats, a lawsuit, public retaliation, more empty words, I almost laughed. I was so predictable. And honestly, it was pathetic. "You're embarrassing yourself," was all I gave her before I hung up. I wasn't about to let her think she had even a sliver of power left. Not after everything. Nicola called me the next day. Her voice was steady, calm, in the way that always made me feel like she had everything under control. She told me how bad things had gotten at Ella's workplace, how the fallout was snowballing. Multiple people were fired. Some willingly resigned to dodge the storm, and there was talk of legal investigations against several employees. Ella's boss wasn't wasting time, apparently. "What you did," Nicola started, and I braced for her judgment. "It was brutal, but it needed to happen." I didn't know what to say to that. It wasn't like I felt particularly heroic. Grim satisfaction, maybe, but nothing clean or righteous. The whole ordeal had drained me. I hadn't slept right in weeks, and I was so wound up I couldn't tell if I wanted to punch a wall or lay down and never move again. Revenge turns out to be a messy business, no matter how justified it feels in the moment. Nicola's voice softened, cutting through my haze. She had it coming, Ivor. Some people don't learn until they lose everything. That stuck with me. For all of Ella's confidence and charm, the thing she cared about most was people's perception of her. She thrived on being the center of attention, the one everyone wanted to impress or be around. And now, her name was mud, her reputation ripped apart by the very traits she leaned on. There was no satisfaction in hearing Nicola spell out the damage. It confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't a clean victory. It wasn't uplifting or cathartic or anything like some redemption arc you'd see in the movies. It just was. Messy, ugly, and entirely deserved. But that didn't mean it felt good. Looking back, the whole ordeal with Ella felt like walking through a wildfire. It wasn't the kind of burn you noticed immediately. It simmered under the surface, creeping into every corner of my life before I even understood what was happening. She had this way of disarming you, making you feel seen, like no one else in the world mattered in that moment. At first, it felt exciting, almost intoxicating. I fell into it hard, convincing myself her intensity was passion, her bluntness honesty. But the cracks started showing quicker than I expected. She thrived on chaos, words thrown like knives during arguments, followed by those fleeting moments of tenderness that made you forget why you were mad in the first place. She turned apology into an art form, using just enough vulnerability to pull you back in while keeping you tethered to her own narrative. The problem was, I never saw it for what it really was until it blew up in my face. That night at the firm's mixer still stings when I think about it. The way she laughed, a little too loudly, with coworkers I'd barely met, her charm casting a spell over everyone. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. It was more like watching someone flip a switch, becoming a version of themselves you hardly recognized. By the time I tried addressing it, she had already spun the situation back at me, framing my discomfort as insecurity. I'd stood there, holding my glass tighter than I should have, trying to balance rationality with the gnawing feeling I was being played. But that wasn't even the worst of it. When she showed up unannounced later that week, using an argument as her pretext, it hit me how deeply she had wormed her way into my life. Every conversation suddenly felt like a chess match. Her words weren't just answers, they were carefully placed traps meant to trip me up. And yet, I kept trying to reason with her, hoping logic could untangle what was clearly an emotional hurricane. Walking away from her wasn't easy. For all the dysfunction, she had carved a corner in my life that felt harder to fill than I expected. But that scar? That lingered. It wasn't just her instability I had to process. It was my own willingness to let it slide for so long. Ignoring red flags felt safer than confronting them in real time, a lesson that came at a cost. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed the story, remember to like, subscribe, and comment on the video for more stories like this. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an update. If you have any similar stories to share, leave them in the comments and we'll make sure to bring them to life. Thanks for watching.